In a quiet town in rural America, a heartbreaking story unfolded that would later shock the entire community. John Miller, a struggling factory worker, made a decision that many would call unforgivable. He cast out his disabled son and his devoted wife, Sarah, leaving them to fend for themselves with nothing but the clothes on their backs. It seemed like the end of their world, but fate had other plans. What happened next would turn their misfortune into a story no one would ever forget. Sarah held her son, Ethan, close as they stood on the cold front porch, watching the door slam shut behind them. The man she had once trusted, the father of her child, had turned his back on them. With nowhere to go, she walked to the nearest bus stop, hoping to find shelter before nightfall. She managed to find a small, overcrowded shelter in the city, where she and Ethan could stay temporarily. Life was hard. Sarah had no job, no savings, and her son's medical condition required constant care. But she refused to give up. She reached out to local charities and churches, hoping for a chance to rebuild their lives. Meanwhile, back at home, John thought he had freed himself of his burdens. But karma works in mysterious ways. Within weeks, he lost his job due to cutbacks at the factory. Bills piled up, and with no one to manage the household, his life quickly spiraled out of control. As Sarah struggled to find stability, a kind-hearted woman named Linda, a volunteer at the shelter, took notice of her situation. Moved by Sarah's resilience and Ethan's gentle nature despite his challenges, Linda introduced them to a nonprofit organization that helped single mothers with housing and job training. With their support, Sarah secured a small apartment and started working part-time at a local bakery. It wasn't much, but it was a start. More importantly, she found a doctor who agreed to treat Ethan at a reduced cost. For the first time in weeks, she felt hope. Meanwhile, John's life unraveled rapidly. Without Sarah, he realized how much he had depended on her. The house was a mess, overdue bills stacked on the counter, and his loneliness gnawed at him. He attempted to find another job, but his poor reputation among employers made it difficult. One evening, he sat alone in the dark, staring at the empty living room. That was when he saw a news segment on TV, an interview with a struggling mother who had turned her life around. His breath caught in his throat. It was Sarah. John's heart pounded as he watched Sarah on the screen. She looked different, stronger, more confident. The interviewer praised her resilience, highlighting how she had overcome adversity and was now advocating for struggling single mothers. Ethan, sitting beside her in his wheelchair, smiled brightly. John felt a mix of emotions: guilt, regret, and a strange sense of admiration. He had convinced himself that life without them would be easier, but now, watching them thrive without him, he realized the painful truth. He had made the worst mistake of his life. Desperate to make amends, John searched for Sarah's contact information. He found the nonprofit that had helped her and called, asking to speak with her. When Sarah received the message, she hesitated. A part of her still felt the sting of abandonment, but another part was curious. Against her better judgment, she agreed to meet him at a small cafe. The next day, John arrived early, nervous and uncertain. When Sarah walked in with Ethan, he barely recognized the woman before him. She radiated strength and independence. Sitting across from her, he struggled to find the right words. I'm sorry, he finally said, his voice trembling. I was a fool. Sarah looked at him for a long moment before responding. Yes, you were, she said calmly. And now you have to live with that. John swallowed hard, realizing that forgiveness would not come easily, if at all. But he knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took to make things right. John sat in silence, absorbing Sarah's words. He had expected anger, maybe even tears, but her quiet strength unsettled him more than any outburst would have. He looked at Ethan, who met his gaze with a mix of curiosity and hesitation. The boy had grown. His face carried the innocence of childhood, but there was something else there now: resilience. I don't expect you to forgive me, John finally said, his voice low, but I want to make things right. I want to be there for Ethan, for you. Sarah exhaled, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. You had that chance, John, and you threw it away. John flinched at the bluntness of her words but nodded. I know. I was selfish. I thought life would be easier without the burden. But the truth is, I was the burden. For the first time, Sarah saw sincerity in his eyes. But could she trust it? I don't need your apologies, she said firmly. Ethan and I built a life without you, and we're doing fine. John swallowed hard. He had expected this. He deserved this. But still, he couldn't walk away without trying. I don't want to disrupt what you've built, he said carefully. I just want a chance to be in Ethan's life, even if it's just as someone he sees from time to time. Sarah studied him. Part of her wanted to shut him out forever. But another part, the part that believed in second chances, wondered if Ethan deserved to make that choice for himself. She looked at her son. Ethan, she said gently, your dad wants to be in your life. How do you feel about that? The boy hesitated, then looked at John. Are you gonna leave again? His voice was soft but carried the weight of a child who had been abandoned. John felt a lump in his throat. No, he said firmly. Never again. Sarah watched the exchange, her heart torn between protecting her son and allowing him the chance to rebuild what was lost. Finally, she sighed. We'll take it slow, she said. But understand this, John, one mistake, one sign that you're not in this for the right reasons, and we walk away for good. John nodded, his chest tight with emotion. That's all I ask. As they left the cafe, John knew that redemption wouldn't come easy, but for the first time in years, he had hope. John knew words alone wouldn't fix what he had broken. He needed to prove, through actions, that he was serious about being part of Ethan's life. The following weekend, Sarah cautiously allowed a short visit at a public park. John arrived early, nervous but determined. When Ethan and Sarah arrived, the boy was hesitant, staying close to his mother. John didn't push. Instead, he simply sat beside them on a bench, making light conversation about the ducks in the pond and the kids playing nearby. Slowly, Ethan started to engage, answering in short sentences at first, then asking questions of his own. As the visits became more frequent, John made sure to be present and consistent. He showed up on time, never canceled, and never made promises he couldn't keep. He learned how to push Ethan's wheelchair properly, how to listen when the boy talked about his favorite books, and how to simply be there. One afternoon, Ethan surprised him by asking, "Do you want to see my drawings?" John's heart swelled. "I'd love to." Ethan eagerly pulled out a sketchbook, flipping through pages filled with colorful drawings of superheroes, animals, and a small house that looked strikingly familiar. "That's our old house," John murmured. Ethan nodded. "I used to draw it a lot when we left, but now I like drawing new places." John realized what that meant. Ethan was moving forward, and if he wanted to be part of his son's future, he had to keep proving himself worthy. Meanwhile, Sarah remained cautious. She watched John closely, searching for signs of the man who had once abandoned them. But the more she observed, the more she saw someone who was truly trying. Then, something unexpected happened. One evening, Sarah received a call from the nonprofit that had helped her. "There's an opportunity for you," the director said, "a leadership position to help other women like you, but it requires relocating to another city." Sarah's heart pounded. It was a chance to grow, to give back, but it also meant uprooting Ethan again, and possibly leaving John behind just as he was trying to reconnect. She looked at her son, then at the man who was trying to make amends. A difficult decision loomed ahead. Sarah sat in silence after the call, staring out the window. This opportunity was everything she had worked for. A chance to help others, to secure a better future for Ethan. But it also meant moving away just as John was trying to rebuild his relationship with their son. That night she couldn't sleep. Was it fair to take Ethan away when he was finally reconnecting with his father? But was it fair to stay if it meant giving up a better life for both of them? The next day, she decided to be honest with John. They met at a coffee shop, Ethan busy coloring at the table while Sarah quietly broke the news. "I got a job offer," she said. "It's a leadership role at the nonprofit. It means moving to another city." John's expression tightened. "How far?" 3 hours away." A heavy silence hung between them. John looked at Ethan, who was completely unaware of the weight of the conversation. "I see," John finally said. "And what do you want to do?" Sarah sighed. "I want what's best for Ethan, but I also don't want to take him away from you if you're serious about being in his life." John nodded slowly, his hands tightening around his coffee cup. "I am serious, Sarah, but I won't stand in your way if this is what's best for him." Sarah was surprised. She had expected him to fight, to insist she stay. Instead, he was showing the very thing she had doubted: selflessness. "I won't stop you," John continued, "but if you go, I still want to be part of his life. I'll drive every weekend if I have to." Sarah studied him. The man sitting across from her was no longer the same person who had once turned his back on them. Maybe people really could change. "All right," she said finally. "Let's figure out how to make this work." For the first time, they weren't just two people carrying the weight of the past. They were parents working together for their son's future. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and John worked out a plan. They agreed that John would visit Ethan on weekends, and during the summer, Ethan could stay with his father for longer stretches. Sarah was still cautious, but she saw John's commitment. He was showing up, keeping his word, and proving that he wanted to be part of Ethan's life. The move happened quickly. Sarah packed their small apartment, and on the morning of their departure, John helped load the last of the boxes into the moving truck. Ethan hugged him tightly before getting into the car. "See you this weekend?" the boy asked. John smiled, though there was sadness in his eyes. "I'll be there, buddy." True to his word, John made the 3-hour drive every weekend. Sometimes they spent time at the park, other times they simply stayed in, playing board games or watching movies. John was learning how to be a father again, one small step at a time. But life had a way of testing even the best intentions. A few months into the new routine, John lost his car in an accident. He wasn't hurt, but with money tight, replacing it immediately wasn't an option. That meant no weekend visits, at least for a while. When he called Sarah to break the news, he expected frustration, maybe even disappointment. Instead, she surprised him. "We'll figure it out," she said. "Ethan can come stay with you for a few weeks until you get things sorted." John was stunned. "Are you sure?" "I wouldn't offer if I wasn't," she said simply. "I see how much he looks forward to your time together. I won't take that away from him." The next weekend, Sarah drove Ethan back to their old town, dropping him off at John's small apartment. For the first time in years, John had his son under his roof. Not just for a visit, but for real, uninterrupted time together. He was nervous, but as Ethan wheeled himself through the doorway, looking around curiously, John realized something. This wasn't just about proving himself to Sarah anymore. This was about being the father his son deserved. The first few days of having Ethan stay with him were filled with small victories and unexpected challenges. John quickly realized that parenting wasn't just about spending time together. It was about responsibility. He had to help Ethan with his morning routine, cook balanced meals, and manage his son's physical therapy exercises. One evening, after a long day, John found Ethan struggling to reach a book on a high shelf. Without thinking, he grabbed it for him. "I can do it myself," Ethan said firmly, his face set with determination. John hesitated, then set the book back and watched as Ethan maneuvered his wheelchair closer, using a grabber tool to retrieve it on his own. When Ethan finally got the book, he beamed with pride. John smiled. "You're a tough kid." Ethan grinned. "Mom says I take after her." John laughed, shaking his head. "That you do." As the weeks passed, they fell into a rhythm. John learned to balance work and parenting, and Ethan started trusting his father in a way he never had before. They built memories, movie nights, homemade pizzas, late-night talks about superheroes. For the first time, John felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. Then, one evening, Sarah called with an update. "I got promoted," she said. "I'll be traveling more for work. It's a great opportunity, but it means I'll be away sometimes." John listened carefully. He knew what she was saying without her having to spell it out. "Ethan should stay with me more," he said. There was a pause. "Would you be okay with that?" John glanced over at his son, who was drawing at the kitchen table, humming to himself. "Yeah," he said. "I think we're ready." A few weeks later, Sarah made it official. Ethan would stay with John for the school year, visiting her on holidays and during summer breaks. It wasn't what any of them had planned, but it was what felt right. On the night before Ethan's official move-in, John sat with his son on the couch. "You happy here, buddy?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I like being with you." John felt a lump in his throat. "I like being with you too." Sarah came to visit often, and over time, the walls between them softened. They weren't a couple, but they were a team. More importantly, they were a family, maybe not in the traditional sense, but in a way that truly mattered. John had once made the biggest mistake of his life, but with time, effort, and love, he had been given something rare, a second chance. And this time he wasn't going to waste it.